Answer this question in a way that is completely satisfactory to you and the grand jury without violating the lawyer-client privilege, which is still intact. It was my understanding that in the request for production of documents, that those requests ran against and operated against my personal files. Now, I have some personal files in the White House, and I'm sorry, in this case, I'm not my own lawyer, and I don't know how the distinction is made between, excuse me, files which are the personal files of the president and files which are White House files. But I do have a very clear memory that we were duty-bound to search and turn over evidence, or excuse me, documents that were in my personal file, but not in the White House files. And I believe that the letters to which you refer, Miss Willie's letters and Miss Willie's phone messages, were in the White House file, and therefore I was instructed at least that we had fully complied with the Jones lawyers' request, and that these documents were outside the request.
Mr. President, you're not contending that White House documents stored in the fashion these were stored, are beyond your care, custody, or control, are you?
Mr. Bennett, that may be a legal term of art that I don't have the capacity to answer. I can only tell you what I remember. I remember being told in no uncertain terms that if these were personal files of the president, we had to produce documents. If they were essentially White House files, we were not bound to do so. And so we didn't.
So you're saying somebody told you that you didn't have to produce White House documents?
That's it.
I question the witness that this question should not invade the sphere of the attorney-client privilege.
Yes.
Any conversations with counsel are privileged.
Let me say, maybe, Mr. Kendall, we need a break here. I'm trying to avoid invading the lawyer-client privilege. I can just tell you that I did the best I could to comply with this. And when eventually we did make, of course, all of this public. And it was damaging to Miss Willie and her credibility. It was terribly damaging to her. And the first time she came out with this story, I didn't do it. I only did it when they went back on 60 Minutes and they made this big deal of it, and it turned out she had tried to sell this story and make all this money. And I must say, when I saw how many letters and phone calls and messages there were that totally undercut her account, I myself was surprised.
But you knew there were letters.
I did, sir.
And
I
the
knew
White
that
House is under your control, isn't it, Mr. President?
Well, Mr. Bennett, again, I'm not trying to be, some days I think it's under my control and some days I'm not so sure. But if you're asking me as a matter of law, I don't want to discuss that because that's, I mean, I'll be glad to discuss it, but I'm not the person who should make that decision. That decision should be made by someone who can give me appropriate advice, and I don't want to violate the lawyer-client privilege here.
Well, Mr. President, how are the letters from Kathleen Willey that surfaced after the 60 Minutes episode aired any different from the correspondence and other matters, tangible items, tangible things, of Monica Lewinsky?
Well, the items you asked for from Monica Lewinsky that I produced to you, you know, that there was a tie, a coffee cup, a number of other things I had. Then I told you there were some things that had been in my possession that I no longer had. I don't know if I did that. There was one book, I remember, that I left on vacation last summer.
The same documents that the Jones litigants had asked you
Yes,
for.
but at any rate, they were different. The gifts were in my personal possession, clearly.
In your office at the Oval?
Well, in the books, now that the presidential books were with my other books that belonged to me personally. They were in the Oval.
Where do you draw the line, sir, between personal and White House? You're talking about some documents that are in the Oval Office, and we don't see where you're drawing the line.
Well, Mr. Bennett, I don't think these were, I think the Lewinsky gifts were all non-documents, and you can... Just a moment. I'd like to finish answering the question, please, because this is a legitimate question, I think. There's somebody in the White House Mr. Bennett, who can answer your question, and you could call them up and they could answer it under oath for you. There is some way of disaggregating what papers are personal to the president and what papers are part of the White House official archives of papers. And I don't know how the distinction is made. I just don't know.
Did you direct that personnel, Nancy Hernreich or anyone else, make a search for correspondence from Kathleen Willey and Monica Lewinsky when those documents were called for in the Jones litigation, sir? Did you direct that somebody on the White House staff look for those documents?
I don't believe that I was in charge of doing the document search, sir. So the strict answer to that question is that I didn't.
So you sat back and relied on this legalistic distinction between your personal, which you're in control of, and the White House, which, by the way, you're also in control of. Is that not correct?
I want to object to the argumentative form of the question. We'll allow the witness to answer it. We're now over time, even 30 seconds, so this will be it.
Mr. Bennett, I haven't said this all day long, but I would like to say it now. Most of my time and energy in the last 5.5 years have been devoted to my job. Now, during that 5.5 years, I have also had to contend with things no previous president has ever had to contend with. A lawsuit that was dismissed for lack of legal merit, but that cost me a fortune and was designed to embarrass me. This independent counsel inquiry, which has gone on a very long time and cost a great deal of money, and about which serious questions have been raised, and a number of other things. And during this whole time, I have tried, as best I could, to keep my mind on the job the American people gave me. I did not make the legal judgment about how the documents were decided upon that should be given to the Jones lawyers and ones that shouldn't. And I might add that Miss Willey would have been very happy that these papers were not turned over because they damaged her credibility so much, had they not ultimately been turned over after she made, I think, the grievous error of going on 60 Minutes and saying all those things that were not true. But I did not make the decision. It was not my job. This thing was being managed by other people. I was trying to do my job.
Mr. President, the grand jury, I'm notified, still has unanswered questions of you, and we appeal to you again to make yourself available to answer those questions.
Mr. Bennett, our agreement was for 4 hours. We've not counted the break time against that. And I think
you know, Mr. Bennett, I wish I could do it. I wish the grand jurors had been allowed to come here today as we invited them to do. I wanted them down here. I wanted them to be able to see me directly. I wanted them to be able to ask these questions directly, but we made an agreement that was different, and I think I will go ahead and stick with the terms of it.
The invitation was made after there was political fallout over the deposition circumstances with the satellite transmission and the taping. Isn't that so?
I don't know about the taping, Mr. Bennett. I understood that the prospect of the grand jurors coming down here was raised fairly early. I don't know. But anyway, I wish they could have. I respect the grand jury.
Just for the record, the invitation to the grand jury was contingent upon us not videotaping, and we had to videotape because we have an absent grand jury. Thank you.
Is that the only reason, Mr. Weissenberg, you have to videotape?
Well, yeah. Do you want to answer that, Mr. Weissenberg?
Silly.
Thank you very much.
And thus ends the videotape testimony of the president before the grand jury as released by the Republican-controlled majority on the House Judiciary Committee. Now, the White House has issued a statement saying that President Clinton's videotape testimony showed that his conduct, quote,